how is the size? Am I size right?
Yes, welcome aboard. This is Charles Moscowitz. My guest is attorney Peter Ticktin, and this is an issue that I've been covering now for years, going back to the 2020 election and even before, which is the voter integrity and the condition of our voting system, the principle of one man, one vote. And of course, we're all pleased, many of us are, not all, that President Trump won his election. And yet, there still is this issue of voter fraud, which still has to be addressed. There's something much more systemic about it. I mean, Trump won only because his vote, I think, was so overwhelming that it was impossible to stop it. Also, the Republican National Committee got very wise, and they learned their lesson from 2020, and they fielded a team of lawyers. You may have been one of them, Peter, to respond to shenanigans as they cropped up on a dime. They had 500 lawyers on the field, particularly in the battleground states. They had, I think it was, I heard Lara Trump say something like 165,000 volunteers watching the voting polling places, the counting rooms where the absentee ballots are counted. And this is how Youngkin won probably the most honest election in Virginia history, going all the way back to Thomas Jefferson, probably even better than that one too. And now we have a situation where this infrastructure that President Biden himself has acknowledged exists is still in place. And Peter, you are involved in uncovering a particular situation in Florida with regard to the District 14 congressional election. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on there.
Okay. Well, in the 14th the 14th Congressional Circuit is made up of parts of two counties, Pinellas County and Hillsborough County. And so we've been looking at those two counties, and what we focused in on were the requests for mail-in ballots. So requests for mail-in ballots have two columns where you need to put in either your driver's license number, or if you don't have a driver's license number, your personal ID that Florida issues, that number. Mm-hmm. Or column B would be the last four digits of your social security number. And you need either one to be in column A or one to be in column B. And so if you have one in each, you got a yes, yes. If you got one in column A and not B, you got a yes, no. The other way, you got if it's in column B, you got a no, yes. And they're all good, but if you have a no, in other words, if you have nothing in column A and nothing in column B, the computer is supposed to catch that and not process the form.
Correct.
Okay. So what happened here is, and I'll come back to that, what I just said, but generally there's a fraud protection program that all the computers in Florida have. Now, when I'm talking about computers, I'm not talking about Dominion machines or any other kind of voting machines. I'm talking about the computers that the state of Florida has in each county. Okay. And so what we found was there was an aberration in Pinellas County. In Pinellas County, the number of requests for mail-in ballots ranged from 0 to about 2,000 a day. The average was 408 in the last 4 months before the election, not counting what happened on September 9th. Okay.
All right.
But all the other days you had about, the average was 408. So, you had between 0 and 2,000 pretty well. One day there was a bit of what I call a rogue wave, right?
Right. An outlier.
Yeah. There was an outlier of 6,000, and that was within the acceptable bounds. I mean, if you're at sea and there are 30-foot waves, then you could theoretically have a rogue wave of 100 feet. That could with 3 waves combined, basically. And so the 6,000 is not anything to scream about.
Okay.
But and I remember I said it leaving out September 9th because on September 9th, the number of requests that were processed were 198,106.
Oh my God. 198,000 in one day in this one congressional district? That's very, very suspicious.
Right. Very suspicious indeed. But what we also saw, now getting back to the initial part of what I was telling you, is that 37,000, that's not the exact number, but 37,000 of them plus had no-nos. It didn't have a driver's license number or identification number or a Social Security, the last 4 digits of a Social Security number. So that means that the fraud detection was either turned off or overridden or somehow didn't apply. So because I mean, if it did, all 37 of those would have been caught and they wouldn't have been processed.
So this is either a malfunction in the case of this particular district, or this could have been a crime. This is a felony. I mean, somebody might have manipulated the system.
Oh, yes. But now I've been in contact with some very interesting people who've been working on this. And there's a fellow named Andrew Kett, who is, I think he's probably a genius. He has been analyzing for the last 2 years in the states of New York, in the 48th District of California, and in the in parts of Texas, and also in Wisconsin. He's done an analysis of these things, and in New York, what he found, because even so, I mean, let's just say you have these applications, these requests for the request for the ballots, the mail-in ballots. Somebody has to be sending them in. So like you're wondering, well, who could be sending these? I mean, where are they getting these extra voters?
And and we're talking again 195,000 in one day, which is statistically impossible, actually.
It is. And it turns out that it may have been actually, these may come from one day in June and then got removed from June and put into and got put into the subsequent time. So you're looking at this stuff and you're wondering, well, where are they getting these voters? Are these people that came in illegally through the border, that they got their identification? Are they using people that had that died? Are they using people, women who have renamed themselves, got a new name because they got married or divorced?
Could be students who are moved out of town, or people who have left the state, for various reasons.
Right, and it turns out, talking to Jerry Corsi and also this other fellow, Andrew Piquet, with their analysis of what they've been doing, is they've been finding that it's clones, and there's been cloning that's been going on since the early 2000s, and it's gotten really bad now. It's gotten to the point where it could be
what Biden was talking about when he said that we've built the biggest voter fraud machine in world history back in 2020. So you're saying that these are clones and not really human beings. It's some kind of an apparition that's been created and registered to vote.
Right, with a very and the thing is that this fellow Andrew has broken the code in New York.
Wow.
And and
incredible.
that's what's really incredible. The algorithms that are applied. And he was showing all this to me yesterday and blowing my mind, because this is probably exactly how this all played out, because they have to be able to not only use these people that are in the system, but then they have to be able to hide them again in the system, because obviously you don't want this readily available. But I could actually
somehow in the voting system, you have these clones that obviously, and in large numbers, that don't exist and that can be somehow manifested at the right time, and then they disappear.
Right, exactly, and that's what they did. They count the vote.
I heard about this in 2020 also.
Yeah, nobody broke the algorithm. Nobody was able to.
So now it's been broken. Now your lawsuit is going to bring. I hope it's going to bring out this kind of testimony.
Oh, absolutely,
to the public.
And I'm hoping that that Pam Bondi picks up on it as well, because once we can show the evidence in court, then it's going to require her to basically bring people to justice, because you see they made one big mistake, the left, the cabal, whatever you want to call them. I don't yeah, I don't like to think of them as Democrats, because when you think of them as Democrats, you're talking about like it's almost like a legitimate party, but this is infiltrators. These are Marxists that or you call them globalists, whatever. I'd rather call them globalists.
There are different names for them.
Yeah, but it's far different than the old Republic or Democratic Party. Okay, it's not.
I mean, it's nothing to do with parties. I mean, Michael J. Glennon he's a professor emeritus at Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and he wrote a book called Double Government, where he shows how this has been a phenomena that really started when Truman signed into the national security law in 1948, and that it's boomed since then into this infrastructure that doesn't matter who. He says, like the people that are in office, the president, the Supreme Court, he refers to them as the Madisonians. That's like the window dressing. They're the sort of in the public face. And then he talks about the Trumanites, who are the what Trump calls the deep state. That's the national security apparatus that's really infiltrated all areas of our society.
And it looks very much like the that this work that's been done in terms of these programs they're not done by some individual. This looks like the kind of stuff the U.S. might have done in other countries that they decided to bring home.
In other words, when we're involved with nation building or interfering in the elections of other countries, this sort of apparatus was developed, except we didn't expect that it would be applied to our own politics. And Peter, what you're saying then in your county, where you're bringing the lawsuit, that this really could be kind of a template for what's gone on all around the country, not necessarily in every state.
It is that. And our looking at this leads us to a conclusion, or it leads at least the people advising me to the conclusion that that we're probably there's probably twice as many Democrats sitting in the House of Representatives than there should be.
And probably Trump won many more states than he won. He probably had like he probably, it could have been like Nixon's election in 1972, where he won every single state except one, my own state of Massachusetts. I mean, I don't know if it's that big, but this is an electoral. It's not voter fraud; it's election fraud, and that it's an infrastructure that's in place in pretty much every state, including many of the so-called red states. I mean, here in Massachusetts, for example, a few years ago, they legalized driver's licenses for illegal aliens, and they handed out how many? We don't know how many hundreds of thousands of those, but they're not.
But they didn't use them. If this is true, I mean, we have to dig in. I got to see and make sure that that what I'm finding here and what looks very, very real to me is true. Yes. But if it is true, they didn't need any illegal immigrants. They have everybody they need already in the system. There's as much as 17 90% of the voters that are registered are actually phantoms. They're
not real.
They're not real. And then you can't call them, the reason that we call them clones rather than duplicates is because there's a different voter identification number, but the rest of it's the same. And we can actually see them in the different lists that are available to the public. So in the voting base. So this is,
and we're not even talking here about the voting machines by that famous voting machine company. I'm not even going to mention its name because they'll sue you. But that's a whole different ball of wax. I mean, that's another subject for other experts. We're talking here. I mean, this is it's a multifaceted. It's like a Medusa. This system. There's so many avenues you could go down. But we're talking here about one particular one that's not well known, and that's this algorithm voter.
Yeah, that's in the machines. That's what it is. You know, if they're cheating in other ways, I don't know those other ways. Okay, right. So in terms of
your area is a particular area,
and so on, I can't voice an opinion that they are or they're not being used, but they don't need them. They don't need the other votes. You know what they needed here, they have. They have as many. You know, the limit as to how many votes you're going to be able to use to rig the system. And the reason that Donald Trump got elected is he was too big to rig. And in the state of Florida, the same thing happened with Rick Scott, and the same thing happened with Marco Rubio. That they won because they were too big to rig, but the rig was still in. They lost every single county when it came to the mail-in votes by a ratio of either 2-to-1, 3-to-1, or sometimes even 4-to-1. That's what was going on with the mail-in votes. And yet they were still able to get enough walk-in votes that they were able to prevail and win.
Now, I thought that Florida had certain, well, you said they had this system in place to identify mail-in ballots, and you had the no, but the problem is that in certain areas that was shut off or was shut down, and probably it has a stop-loss figure which basically allows for them to go through unless it reaches a certain threshold.
Well, that's why it makes so much sense that if these are clones, everything else adds up and makes sense. Because if they're clones, it was within the system. It wasn't something that got processed through the system, so those programs wouldn't have had anything to do with it.
And now, have you brought this to the attention of Governor DeSantis?
I have been finding out about. I filed a lawsuit in Tallahassee in regard to the 14th Congressional District on last Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So we're about a week out from that. I do want to get together with Pam Bondi and I do want to basically go through these things with her. You know, I'll tell you this: the left made one really big mistake, and that is they lost the election. If you're it's kind of like, let's just say you're gunning for some kind of a murderer, right? And you shoot the murderer. Well, you better kill him, because if he survives, he's going to shoot you. He's going to kill you. It's sort of like that. Certain things you don't do unless you know you're going to succeed. And you can cheat in an election if you know you're going to succeed, because then your people are there and making sure that you never get caught.
But they're still trying to pull off some rear guard actions. I mean, I follow, for example, Norm Eisen on Twitter, and he's very honest about what they're up to over there at Democracy Docket, so-called. In their, they tried to steal Pennsylvania for Casey, and they were counting ballots that were blatantly false and illegal. Till finally, the Democratic governor Shapiro stepped up and put an end to that. But even now in California, 1 month later, they're still counting ballots in 2 congressional districts. And now, in both cases, the Democrat has pulled ahead by like a handful of votes.
Yeah, 100 votes. Yeah, the last one was 100.
That's a state, by the way, that has no voter ID, which is why, thankfully, President Trump has said that he supports national voter ID for all 50 states. Basically, a position that used to be a Democratic position, but they switched sides. They changed their mind almost in unison.
Well, if you really look at what's going on, I mean, it's not that the Democratic Party has changed sides; it's that it's been usurped. You get the World Economic Forum going the way they're going with their drive for what they think they have to do in terms of global warming and so on.
Right.
And they, they basically have committed. There's less than 2,800 billionaires in the world, and almost all of them are now signed on with the World Economic Forum, where they basically pledged 30% of their holdings to be used. They don't give the money to the World Economic Forum, but they will use the money for purposes of the World Economic Forum. So then they say to somebody like Bezos, something, we need you to buy the Washington Post. So you're wondering why is it that all the media is so one-sided and so much against Donald Trump and so in favor of all the other craziness, wokeism and so on, and it's because they've been bought. They're bought live fucking barrel, and so the same is true with the Democrat Party. It's been taken over not by so much the left extremes, but by the globalists. And these are foreign interests as well as extreme left American interests.
Right, and also I think that you have the drug cartel money pouring in to the tune of unbelievable amounts that have corrupted the Democratic Party. That is why Biden's left the border open, and it's fueled international terrorism, including apparently Hezbollah, which has deeply involved with Venezuelan drug cartels. So we're talking about huge, off the record, off the books money sloshing around. And really, I mean, the fact that President Trump was able to win, we have a little reprieve here to try to save this country, to try to expose this.
That's exactly what we've got, and nothing more.
Yeah,
that's all we have. If we don't succeed this time, we're gone. And so, but so far so good. I know that's what the guy said when he fell out of the 50-story window. Every story on the way down. So far so good. So far so good. But the fact of the matter is, we needed to win that election, or we were gone.
Thank God we did, and we have at least a breathing room now.
Yeah. But there's no breathing room. But we're on the way. And
that's right.
we got.
It's people like you, Peter, who are doing God's work here, bringing lawsuits and really putting your neck out to try to expose this situation. I hope that as your case proceeds, you get the kind of attention you should get. You should contact. I'm sure you know this, but I really hope you contact Steve Bannon and his program. It's huge, one of the best on. He's got millions of followers, and he has a huge influence, and he's very much in touch with President Trump. He would be all over this, I really think, if you can reach him.
Yeah, I don't know that you know this about me, but I'm friends with Donald Trump. I've known him for 63 years.
Right.
When we were 15, we were in high school together. When we were 17, that was the year we actually lived together in the barracks of New York Military Academy. And he made me a platoon sergeant. He was my captain. Wonderful. And so I know Donald pretty well, and have said to people what I know of him, which is all very positive stuff, because he just is that. I don't have a bad word to say. When you live with somebody for almost a year, and you don't have a bad word to say about them,
incredible, man. I hope that he makes you the czar of voting irregularity.
I'll just do what I can do.
Okay.
Well,
so Peter, how can people reach you? I want people to be able to contact your office and maybe book you on their shows and support your work.
Oh yeah, okay. Just pt@legalbrains.com. That's my email address, or legalbrains.com. That's my the website for my office, the Ticktin Law Group.
Let's stay in touch, Peter. Really, I admire you and what you're doing. I've been on this issue for years, and I just think if we don't get this right, we don't have a country. If we don't preserve the sacred vote of the one man, one vote principle, we're done. So Thank you
I think we can.
for what you're doing.
Yeah,
Thank you
this is
very
our
much.
chance for good worldwide.
Indeed.